Hello everyone, Nathaniel Gavronsky here, and I'm in Gramercy. This is one of the most interesting neighborhoods in all of New York City. Now, Gramercy gets its start as a swamp. In fact, the Dutch called it Gramercy because that was the name for little swamp, and this is what this was for all of its early history. In fact, it took 100 horse carts of dirt to fill in the area so it could be used for anything else other than being a swamp. In fact, a little stream actually ran down 20th Street, which is kind of where I'm standing, that emptied out into the East River. The early parts of this, as far as growing and becoming part of the English part of New York, this was a farm. Now, it went from Gramercy to Gramercy through a little bit of Anglo-Franco-ization of the words. Okay, so from Gramercy, it became Gramercy. And then it kind of took on an archaic Middle English word, Gramercy, which is two words, English and French, for grand mercy, which is many things. So Gramercy is a 14th century Middle English word, which is archaic even for this time period for many things. But that was the way everyone kind of understood it and said it, so it became known as Gramercy. Long before this area became the park and the neighborhood, it was known as Gramercy Farm. And the area was owned by a gentleman by the name of James Duane. He was the 44th mayor of New York City. As you know, going from New Amsterdam to New York City, he was the 44th mayor of New York City. He was also the first mayor of New York that was the mayor after the Revolution, so the first mayor of a sovereign New York City, of a sovereign New York state. He served in both Continental Congresses, and he also served as a delegate to the Articles of Confederation government for the early United States. He would also be appointed as a judge by George Washington to serve the New York area. He was really well liked and beloved by everyone, and had a huge impact on early New York City social life. When he died in 1797, his children took over his estate, leading us to 1831, when a gentleman by the name of Sam Ruggles purchased the area, and he wanted to make it into a residential area. He was a prominent lawyer, and he was a real estate developer. So this becomes like the very first privately owned development in U.S. history. So you have these 66 lots that Sam breaks down, right? And by December 17th, 1832, he transfers it over to the 5 trustees that would make up the trusteeship of New York's Gramercy neighborhood. That trusteeship still exists today, actually, and this is the oldest surviving private park in all of New York. So starting off, they kind of laid the park out. They didn't really build any buildings right away. They were kind of getting the area situated. They were getting all the documentation needed to do. Making sure it was going to be held private. This fence is from the early 1830s. They started locking it up very early on. This park is only for residents of the Gramercy neighborhood. You have to be a member of the trustees to get the key to the gate. Now, because of the economic scare of the 1837, a little bit later than that, development slowed down a little bit, but that was a blessing in disguise, mainly because by the time they start building buildings here, indoor plumbing was a thing. So all the early buildings here in Gramercy had indoor plumbing, which was revolutionary for the time period. But because of New York City's, cutting edge of everything, they were some of the first to have indoor plumbing in these apartment buildings. Now, from the 1840s up to the Civil War, this was still a private park. You had to be a member of the residences to enter into it. But during the Civil War, they stationed soldiers here. And that was a good thing, because when the Great New York City riot happened in 1863, the Army had to put down the riot, and this park was actually protected by military cannon in case people tried to come in and damage the surrounding area. The U.S. military protected this area during the Great New York City riots, so during the Civil War. After the Civil War, it returned back to its private ownership and private use, and it would stay that way even up until today. It is still all private. It is owned by the residents of the Gramercy neighborhood. Now, there's been a lot of famous residents in this area throughout the years. Teddy Roosevelt was born just a few blocks away from here and spent most of his early childhood in this area. Another person who spent a lot of time here is a guy by the name of Edwin Booth. Now, Edwin Booth, many people might not really realize who he is today, but he had, at the time, a less known, more infamous brother named John Wilkes Booth. And John Wilkes Booth got his fame from assassinating Abraham Lincoln in 1865. But Edwin Booth, because of his relation, that damaged his reputation quite considerably. But in this park, there is actually a statue to him in the center. And just behind me over here is the original Players Club that Edwin Booth founded. He would actually live in one of the units up there for most of his life. A lot of early celebrities from, just after the Civil War period, all the way up to the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, would all kind of coalesce here in Gramercy. This was the hit place to be. This is where everyone wanted to get married. This is where everyone wanted to show that they had status by living in the Gramercy neighborhood. And it still is that way today. It's a very, very artsy neighborhood. It's maintained all of its old charm. In fact, the oldest cooperative building in New York City is building number 34. In fact, some of the oldest apartment buildings in New York City are in the Gramercy area. So a lot of the scholars and literary minds of the day would actually call this place the Victorian gentleman that refuses to die, because even though that the state and the city twice tried to run trolleys through here to modernize the city, because New York doesn't really care about the historical stuff. They always want to be the newest, the nicest, the best. So they wanted to put trolleys through the middle of this park, and they were never allowed to do it, thankfully, and is able to keep this park pristine the way it was envisioned by Samuel Ruggles so early on. So the borders of this area, so from 14th Street, which is the Union Square Street, 14th, you run that from Irving Plaza, in Irving Place, you run 14th all the way to First Avenue. You run First Avenue north to 23rd, East 23rd. You run East 23rd back over to Park South, which actually was originally 4th Avenue. You take Park South down to 18th Street, and you take 18th Street back down to Irving Place, and Irving Place back down to 14th. That is the borders of Gramercy. Now, to make it easier access to the area for the developers, they got the state legislature to plot 2 major roads that would run north and south of the park, but not through it. On the south end is Irving Place. Now, Irving Place is named after George Washington Irving, who just 10 years prior to this development wrote the story Legends of Sleepy Hollow. North, the road running north, is Lexington Avenue, which was named after the Great Revolutionary War Battle of Lexington. And that is basically how we kind of get the borders of the Gramercy and a little bit of the history. But like I said, if you want to visit, you want to see what New York City would have been like, with modern traffic, but the buildings, the architecture from the 1900s and 1800s, this is the area. So basically 1884 to 1905 is when most of these buildings here were built, and you can get to envision what the architecture would have been like, the iron work, the staircases. This is the only neighborhood remained any of that stuff. And it remained it because basically out of spite of the rest of the city wanting to modernize so desperately, that this little area maintained that feeling of that old Victorian gentleman that refuses to die. And even today, it is still a very hustling area. There's a lot of people, you can see people coming and going all over the place. Also, there was the famous Gramercy Hotel, which recently closed because of the pandemic and is not going to be reopening. We'll see what developments have there. But you can kind of imagine some of the wealthier New Yorkers. This was uptown New York, traveling up to watch the old New York Giants baseball team play before the Yankees ever got here. So this is a really nice little part of New York. I hope people, when you come visit New York City, when you're done with Union Square, take a little walk up and then over, check out Teddy Roosevelt's house, and then come on down to the Players Club and kind of walk around and see some of these nice old buildings and see the oldest private park in New York. You won't be able to go into it, obviously, but you will at least get to see it, and the statue is visible from the outside. It is a really cool part of town. I've always liked it. It's quite safe, even at night. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay healthy, stay wealthy, and as always, stay classy, New York.